So much to get through, but before we talk about that, I want to ask you your opinion, because we heard this week the RBA Governor Guy Debelle indicate that we might be out of a recession. We're hearing mixed reports. So what is your take on this?
Yeah, look, it certainly looks like things are looking a lot more positive than they were prior to the lockdown prior to mid-June. So basically what happened with the economy, we started to really pick up in June. The absolute low point of the economy was early May, but then of course we had the Victorian lockdown, which really derailed things to a large extent. If we have a look at the inflation figures that came through, we did see a big drop, but they've increased again last month, so that's a positive. We have seen in every state except Victoria, most people returned, not most people, but a lot of the jobs that have been lost have now been recovered. So we still do have big problems with unemployment, particularly youth unemployment is a very problematic area at the moment, but it does look like we are now in recovery.
And then I guess you've got to look at the factors of JobKeeper and JobSeeker and the changes that may occur over the next few months.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, we are being supported by a lot of government spending at the moment. So that's really helping people. Things like JobKeeper, JobSeeker are leading to people having far more stable household finances than they would otherwise. The other big issue too is that people are saving a lot. Household savings gone from 6% of household income to 20%. We do have incredibly low interest rates. We've got a Reserve Bank announcement coming up on Tuesday where we may see them cut again. We had Shane Elliott on Sky talking about how much money there is available at the moment. So we do have productivity problems, but at the same time we've got very cheap and very easy to access finance, which is very unusual in a recession this deep.
It's a big week in the world of elections. We've got the Queensland election today and obviously the US election next week. Nerida, how does political unrest overseas influence Australia?
Yeah, look, it's interesting with the US election. I mean, it won't have a huge, whatever the result, it won't have a huge impact on the Australian economy. We're not that reliant on the US, particularly for exports, in the same way that we are reliant on China. What we are seeing on realestate.com.au is a very big pickup in search activity coming out of the US at the moment. So this does typically happen in times of political instability. We saw it when Brexit was announced in 2016. We did see this surge of activity out of the UK. That's since moderated. Same with what happened in Hong Kong when we started to see a lot of instability around some of the announcements made to changes to the relationships with China. So there's been a lot of surge activity from both those countries. When we look at the US, the areas we can see the biggest increases are coming from New York. So New York, we've seen more than a doubling of search activity. So New York has, of course, been hit by very high levels of COVID. It is a Democrat state, so that's also helping things along. There's a lot of political uncertainty. There are a lot of expats there as well, so that's not surprising. When we have a look at where there's been drops, Oklahoma comes in as being the area seeing the biggest drop in activity. So some interesting trends coming out of the US. Whether it leads to migration, obviously we don't know. It's search activity. It means they're interested in Australia. They like to look at Australian property, but whether it leads to transactions or increased migration, that does remain to be seen.
And we just saw on screen some of the Australian suburbs where the expats. Talk us through that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Byron Bay is topping the list at the moment, no surprises. We've seen incredible levels of activity across from Australians as well, looking at Byron Bay, and it is flowing through to pricing. So Byron Bay prices jumped 25% over the past 3 months. So, there's certainly a lot of activity, not just from Australians searching Byron Bay, but overseas. When we have a look at where most US-born residents live in Australia, it is Mossman. So that's also sitting there on the list, but very much a beachside. A lot of beaches that they're very interested in, and as a result, perhaps that'll be where they move to if they do decide to come to Australia.
So you say beaches, and we can see there's a Bondi, Mossman, as you said, those places. Why? I mean, they're beautiful parts of the world, but why are we seeing that? Besides it being so beautiful, is there another reason?
Yeah, look, I think Byron Bay is so interesting because there's only 54 US-born residents there. In 2016, there was only 54 US-born residents in Byron Bay. Obviously, what's happening there in terms of Hollywood interest is likely driving it. So when we do see lots of search out of certain countries, it is iconic locations that it's typically from. So you can see that, places like Manly do have international recognition, Bondi, Mossman not so much, but, it is very much driven by reputation reputation, family and friends, those sorts of things tend to drive activity. When we look at Asian property seekers looking in Australia, it is quite different. They're not so interested in our beaches, but very interested in our education sector. So there is quite a difference between the way that Asian property seekers look at Australia compared to everywhere else around the world.
Very comprehensive as always. Nerida Conisbee, see you next week. Chief Economist at RBA Group. Take care.
Thanks. See you then.